Bibles to the book of Samuel. We're going to start back in the first chapter, but we're going to fast forward real quick up to the 9th chapter. We'll be talking about donkeys tonight after a while. God can use anything He chooses. Right. God used a snake, do you believe it? God did use a snake. Not in the Old Testament, in the New Testament. God uses donkeys. God uses cows. God uses dogs, sheep. God can use anything to accomplish His plan. Now, I want you to always bear this in mind. God always has a plan. You don't build a building by just thinking it up and saying, this is what we're going to do. You visually see in your mind, and usually somebody drafts it, puts it on paper, dimensions, what materials, how it's going to be built. And then the man comes out and he builds it. And you can take the blueprint. It may not look like that when it starts. You would never go out after a foundation's poured and subfloors and studs and roof on it, and you say, that does not look anything like what it's supposed to look like. Well, God, the guy's still working on it. It's like us. God's still working on us. He hasn't got us completed yet. So God has a program. Now, we've studied for several weeks about the judges. God always took men of no stature, insignificant men, no powerful men, so that He would get all the honor and glory for everything they did. Those judges fought for Israel to free them from slavery and bring them out from captivity. So after Samson, judges came to an end. And then they started back in the priestly line. But then God is going to raise up His first prophet, His first priest. And Samuel is a prophet priest. Now, it does not speak, when you read Samuel, it does not speak of him as being a prophet. What does it call him? What's these things? Eyes, and what you do out of your eyes? See. So in Samuel, he is referred to as the seer. The seer. And what that means is that they thought that he could see what was out in the future, and he would tell them things that was going to happen. He could not see out in the future. He only told them what God told him. So the people were a little mixed up on that. Later on, they're referred to in the Old Testament as prophets. And in the New Testament, then we are called preachers. We're not seers. I don't see the future. God's never told me about any future event. I've run across a few preachers that said that they can see into the future, and I think something's wrong with them when they tell me that. So I can't find it to be biblical scripture. So Samuel is the person that in this period of time, coming from the judges, the priestly line goes back and takes over again, and we're going to see a wicked priest that's in power. So in the book of Samuel, the first chapter, before Samuel was born, there was some unusual events that took place in the first chapter. His father was married to 2 different women. And Peninnah, she had children. That was one of his wives. And then Hannah was the other wife. Now there's a close relationship with all these things that happens to Jesus Christ. Now, back when Israel, the nation Israel, was founded, who was after she passed her age of having kids, and Lord, he was past the age. He was an old man. But God always takes and does the impossible. So this was pointing down the road that God one day would do more than a barren womb, a womb that had never produced a child and couldn't produce a child, that He would have someone that had a fertile womb that could produce a child but never had any relations with a man. So this happened to Abraham. He had a child with Sarah when she was an old woman. Now we're going to see Hannah, that she had not had any children and she was barren and couldn't have any. And so Peninnah, his other wife, she made fun of him year after year after year. Now I can just see this. Every time they would go up to make sacrifices unto God, she'd take her kids along, and here Hannah didn't have any kids, and they was mocking her and making fun of her. And so her husband said to her, Hannah, I don't understand why you're acting the way you're acting, because I love you more than I do Peninnah. I care more for you. He said, I love you more than 10 sons. And when it comes time to eat, I give you twice as much as I give my other wife or anybody else in my household. I love you. But if you are it may not be true in the 21st century, but when I was growing up, and then all the way back to the beginning of time, if a woman didn't have children, she felt inferior. There's something about women that want to have babies. I don't know what it is. I've never been one. So I guess I don't understand. But that's the way God created y'all, didn't He? You just have that desire. I know as a man I wanted to be a daddy. But there's something really about a woman wanting to have a child. So Hannah wanted to have a child and she couldn't. So God's getting ready for some plan work. And His plan, it's not just one or two or three or four things that happen. God always takes the unusual things, and when He gets done with them, it winds up into perfection. Boy, these glasses sit on the end of my nose and cause it to itch and I almost sneeze. This is terrible. But I can read, can't I? I can see out of these nooses. So they were going up to the temple. And Hannah, she quit eating. Nothing to eat, weeping, crying. The priest Eli, sitting outside, saw Hannah inside. And Hannah was moving her lips, but she wasn't uttering a word. And Eli, the priest, looked over and said, I know what your problem is. You're drunk. So he went up to her and said, why do you want to come in the house of God drunk? And she said, I'm not drunk. Hadn't had any wine to drink or any strong drink at all, but said, I've really got a burden on my heart. It was never told Eli what the burden was, but said she was in great distress and hurt inside. And her pain was that she had not been able to have a child. And the other wife, she was making fun of her. So this is what Eli said. He said, whatever you've asked God for, that's what you're going to get. So it said that after that, she got up, she ate, and her countenance changed. And the reason that it did, she believed what the priest had told her. She believed she was going to have a baby. They ate. She went back home. It says that her husband came in, lay with her, and she conceived. God was true on His promise. And it says that after she conceived, she gave birth. This is over in the 20th verse of the first chapter. She gave birth to Samuel, and she called him Samuel because it means ask of the Lord. asked of the Lord. She asked God for a son, and God gave her a son. There's a stipulation that she placed on her request to God. And the stipulation was this: God, if you will give me a child, you give me a child, when I wean him, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to give him right back to you. And as long as he lives, God, this son that you've given me, I'm going to give him back to you, and he will serve you all the days of your life. It came time to go back to Jerusalem and offer sacrifices. Hannah told her husband, said, I'm not going because I made a vow to God, and when Samuel, when I wean him, then I'm going to take him to Jerusalem, and I'm going to present him to the priest. Well, they didn't have the temple built in, but where the priest was, that's where they was at Shiloh. They was going to present him. So it says that when she weaned him, she took him to Eli, and she gave him to Eli. Now this is a little weanling child, and the mother goes back home, and now he is in the care of the high priest of Israel, Eli. But there's a problem. It says that Eli had some sons. And the sons that he had, Eli was getting old, and he had turned the business of running the work of God over to his sons. Because the priestly line, the daddy would turn the work over to the sons out of the tribe of Levi. And so the sons said, the Bible said that the sons knew not God, neither did they do right in the sight of God. And here's the problem. It said that the women that came to the house of God, they were having sexual relation with them as they came. So God's house was no more than a whorehouse. Now you just put this in. That kind of reminds you of some of the preachers down through the years. They've been widely advertised on TV, hadn't they? So that's what was going on in God's house. Eli was God's man, but he got old. Now God's providing for a worker to come along. So Hannah, his mother, had her prayer answered. Hannah gave her son back to God. And Samuel went, and he was raised in the house of God under the man of God. Then one day it talks about that after Eli was very old and Samuel was grown, that God told Eli that he had rejected his sons and that he was going to anoint Samuel as high priest and as prophet. Now, until this time, God spoke to the priest, and the priest spoke to the people. But we're going to see something that becomes in a little different fashion. In the 7th chapter, it talks about Samuel being priest and prophet and judge. And in the 8th chapter, it talks about that Samuel now was getting old. All this time he had been true to God, he had done the work of God, and now he was getting to be an old man. So anytime you get old, people run out of patience with you. They really do. When you're young, everybody likes to be around you. When you get old, don't nobody like to be around you. Come on now, help me. You know it's true. They don't want to be around us. They look at you. And I was in the same place. I didn't like to be around old people when I was young because they couldn't do what I could do. Am I different or strange or something? And so Samuel was getting old, and his way of doing things didn't suit the people. God would speak to him, and he would speak to the people. But did you know Israel was the only nation in the world that had that kind of setup? Every nation in the world besides Israel had him a king. Now, this system God set up way back from Abraham all the way up. And they didn't like this system. They wanted a system like the world had. So he starts in, and I want you to look in the 5th verse with me. Now, you've heard me mention this several times, that the house of God and the work of God is not a democracy, but it is a theocracy. You may not believe that, but I want to show it to you and want you to see it yourself. In the 5th verse, and they said unto him, Behold, thou art old. I told you they didn't like old people. And thy sons walk not in the way. Make us a king to judge us like all the nations. Now, I want to be like everybody else. Now, what has our children told us, and what do our children tell us? I don't see why I can't do it because everybody else is doing it. And before long, they'll break you down and you'll let them do it. Am I right? Yeah. You get tired of, just go on, get out of here and do it. God got tired of hearing this mess. He got fed up of listening to Israel gripe and grumble about everybody else has got a king, everybody else has got a king. All we've got is a seer and he's old. Man, bad things has happened in Israel. 6th verse, but the things displeased Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us, and Samuel prayed unto God. Now that's a pretty good place to start. When we're displeased with anything, we ought to never open our mouths to anybody else. We ought to talk to God about it. Amen? Right. Put it there, leave it there, let it finish there. 7th verse, now here is your theocracy. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee, for they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. I'm going to read the rest of this chapter. And the rest of this chapter shows that in a democracy is that you have a voting right. A democracy is that the majority wins. Now, we're going to see a democracy try to take place and is going to be established. Now, the majority of the Israelites had said, Give us a king. God said, all right, you voted on it, and that's what you wanted. You have not been satisfied with me and what I have done for you. See, up until that time, it was God taking care of the people. It was God leading the people. It was God in charge of the people. Now the people want to turn it around and start a democracy and want to say, all right, God, we have voted. Now we're telling you this is what we want. And God said, all right, if that's what you want, and you majority rules, we're going to see how it's going to work for you. 8th verse. According to all the work that thou hast done since the day that I have brought thee out of Egypt, even unto this day wherewith they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. Now therefore hearken unto their voice. Howbeit you protect solemnly unto them, and shew them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked him of a king. Now this is the price that Israel was going to have to pay. This is what it was going to cost the nation Israel for wanting a king over them instead of God being over them. 10th verse, and Samuel told the people all the words of the Lord, 11th verse, and he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. This is what the king is going to do and what it's going to cost you. He will take your sons and appoint them to himself for his chariots and to the horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint his captains over thousands and captains over fifties, and he will set them their ear to his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war and the instruments of his chariot. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields and your vineyards and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the tenth of your seed and of your vineyards, and give to his officers and to his servants. And he will take them, your men servants and your maid servants and your goodly young men and your asses, and put them in his works. He will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. And ye shall carry out in the days because of your king, which he shall have chosen you. And the Lord will not hear you in that day. 19th verse. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king, that we also may be like all the nations. Isn't that something? Going to reject you, God. We don't like the way you're running things, God. We don't like you telling us what to do. We want a king over us like all the rest of the nations. That we also may be like all the nations, that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he rehearsed them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, Hearken to their voices, and make them a king. And Samuel said unto the men of Israel, Go ye every man unto his city. Now you think, until that time, there was a priest and God. God spoke to the priest, and the priest spoke to the people. That didn't satisfy them. All the rest of the world had kings. So they said, God, we want a king. Samuel comes to God. God already knew it, but now he's going to give him a king. Now this is God's program. How is God going to get them a king? Will God shoot him out of the air? Will he send a parade and have him brought? No, he's going to take some donkeys. God's going to take some donkeys and go get a king for him. What do you think about that? That's a terrible way to get a king. A mule? They're about the dumbest things in the world. I don't know whether you ever worked with one or not. They're stubborn. They're ignorant. They'll bite you. They'll kick you. They'll do anything in the world that they can do. God's going to take something now and give him a king. And it talks about King Saul. His daddy's name was Kish. And it says that he was a mighty man of power. Kish was. And Kish had a son. This is in the 9th chapter. Kish had a son, and his name was Saul. Now remember how God got Samuel to where he was at, and how Israel came against Samuel and said, we don't want you anymore. We don't want God anymore, but we want a king. So now, Kish had a son, a man of power, and it says that in the 3rd verse, or 2nd verse, that Saul was a choice young man. He was a goodly man. He was a handsome man. He was a man of strong features. He was a man that had a good physique. And then it said that he stood head and shoulders above anybody in Israel. That means he was a head taller. If you put him around in this congregation, whoever would be the tallest, he's going to be a head taller. He was a mighty man of stature, a man that would stand out. And God said, if you want a king, I'm going to give you somebody that you can admire. But you're not going to like what he's going to give you. Because what he's going to give you, he's going to take your sons, your daughters, your crops. He's going to take everything from you and He's going to make them His. And God said, you're going to cry out to me and pray to me, but I'm not going to hear you. So, this was the man that was going to be. He's still at home with his daddy. How's God going to get him to be king of Israel? Well, some way and somehow, his daddy's donkeys ran off. So what does Kish do? He goes to Saul, and he said, we've got a problem, son, and I need you to take care of it. He said, you take one of the servants, and you go out and find them little mules that's run off, them donkeys that's run off. And you bring them back. It said that they left, and they went looking for the donkeys. They told every city and every place that they went to, and they didn't find them. They'd been gone for 3 days. So the servant and Saul got into a conversation. And the conversation went like this. We better turn around and go back home because Daddy's going to get worried about us. Because the donkeys have run off, and now we've been gone 3 days, and he'll think that we've got lost too. So we better go back home. And so he thought, well, I've heard about a man of God. Said he is a seer. Let's go over and see the man of God and let him see where them little mules are, them little donkeys are. Isn't God wonderful? He's going to get him a man. He's going to get him a king. He's going to bring him to him. What did he do? Donkeys ran off. The future king went after him, couldn't find him. The servant thought about the man of God. Now here they start. Saul says, well, we can't go see the man of God because we don't have anything to give to him. I like that part. When you see the man of God, you're supposed to bring you a present. Just kidding. But now they did there. And Saul said, the bread that we brought, we've done eat it. We hadn't got anything to give to the man of God. And his servant said, well, I've got a shekel. I got a fourth of a shekel. Anybody know what a shekel's worth? 65 cents. Now, he had a fourth of 65 cents. That's too high math for me to figure out, but it wasn't very much. He said, we'll give that to the man of God. Saul said, good idea. And so when they came to the city where the man of God was, there were some young women running down and gathering water. And so they stopped him and they said, is the man of God here? Is the seer here? And they said, yes, he's inside, but you better hurry because he's going up to the high place to make sacrifice unto God and to eat. While they're up there, he has chosen some people to go with him. Now this is the way God works. Before Saul got there, God had already spoke to Samuel. And God had said, Samuel, tomorrow there's a man coming, and when he gets here, I want you to take him and make him captain of Israel. Gonna be king. Now here's Saul looking for little donkeys. And here God has already proceeded and gone in front of him and told the man of God that he's a-coming. That's pretty good information. So, when he saw Saul coming, he told him. He said, you've lost some donkeys, have you? Lost some little mules. How in the world did the man of God that had never met this man before know that he is mule hunting? That's what he is doing. And Samuel began to tell him all these things. took him up on the high places where he made sacrifice, and he set him down at the table to eat, and told the cook, said, that stuff I told you to put back, said, you bring it out here and you give it to him and his servant. Now God can write a menu, and God can write a program, but it's not like anything I'd write or you'd write or the president of the world would write. But it's God's plan. God always uses simple things, insignificant things, things that really don't have any meaning to anybody else in the world. God always takes those things and gets honor and glory and accomplishes His particular need in their lives. So, we see that he's there and he's eating with him. After they eat, they start back down the hill. And I think this is in the 15th verse of the 9th chapter. And the Lord hath told Samuel in his ear a day before Saul came. You remember me telling you that Samuel already knew that Saul was coming? How did he know? It said the Lord had talked to him in his ear. That's pretty close, didn't it? That's a voice. God spoke in an audible voice to Samuel to know that he was coming, and he told him what all that he needed to do. And it said when they come back down off the hill, his servant is with him, Samuel, Saul, and the servant. Samuel said, you tell your servant to go on ahead because I need to talk to you about some things. And this is where in the 10th chapter and the first verse, this is the thing that he had, the message that he had for him. Then Samuel took a vial of oil and poured it upon the head and kissed him and said, is it not because the Lord hath anointed thee to be captain over his inheritance? When thou art departed from me, well, he tells him to go on to Rachel's sepulchre, and he says, when you get there, they'll say unto you that we have found the little donkeys, the little mules, and their father, your father has quit looking for them and is looking for you. And you shall say, what shall I do, my son? And then in the 3rd verse, then shall they go on forward from thence, and then thou shalt come to the plains of Tabor, and thou shalt meet thee men going up to God, to Bethel, one carrying 3 kids, and another carrying 2 loaves of bread, and another carrying a bottle of wine. And they will salute thee, and shall give thee 2 loaves of bread, which thou shalt receive of their hand. After that thou shalt come to the hill of God, where the garrison of the Philistines, and it shall come to pass when thou art come thither to the city, that thou shalt meet a company of prophets coming down from the high place, with a plastry and a tabret and a pipe and a harp before them, and they shall prophesy. Now he's got a plan. He said, this is where I want you to go, to Rachel's sepulchre. When you get there, he says that you're going to meet prophets coming down, and they're going to be playing a tune. In fact, they're going to have a band with them. Now remember, in the days that we're going to study from here on, when they anointed kings, they always poured oil on their head. And oil in the Bible represents the Holy Spirit of God. It means that it's sanctioned of God, that God is upon them. What it always means. And then after every king was anointed, there was always blowing of the trumpets and the playing of music. Now Saul had just got anointed by Samuel as king, so now he's sending him where that the band can play. First time you're going to see a band playing in the Bible. They had horns, they had tambourines, man, they had a full band that was acknowledging this is the king that God hath anointed. Now, in the 6th verse, and the Spirit of the Lord will come upon thee thee, and thou shalt prophesy with them, and shall be turned into another man. Any time that a man comes in contact with God, and the Spirit of God comes upon that man, comes in that man will never, never be the same again. Will you agree to that? You are a different person. So now we're seeing that God is telling Samuel, and Samuel is telling Saul that he will be a different man. 7th verse, and let it be when the signs are coming to thee that thou do as occasion serve thee, for God is with thee. Now the things that's going to happen to you, Saul, is of God. And thou shalt go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I will come up unto thee to burn offerings and to sacrifice sacrifices of peace offerings. 7 days thou shalt tarry till I come to thee, and shew thee what thou hast to do. And it was so that when he had turned his back to go from Samuel, God gave him another heart, and all those signs came to pass that day. And when he came thither to the hill, behold, a company of prophets met him. Now note this. And the Spirit of God came upon him, and he prophesied among them. Now let's just recap and I'll hush. Let's put it all together. God took a woman, couldn't have kids. She prayed. God gave her a child. She called him Samuel because he was a gift of God and answered prayer. When she weaned him, she took him to the place and gave him to the man of God. He was raised by the man of God. When he became of age, the man of God, sons were the priests, but they were fooling with the women that came to the house of God. That displeased the Lord. So God raised up Samuel and anointed him. Samuel was the seer, and he was the priest between God and man. When Samuel got old, the people didn't want the old man anymore. They wanted a king like all the rest of the world. Samuel went to God in prayer, and it upset him. And God said, they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from ruling over them. Then he told them, he said, this is what it will cost them. You tell them. Your sons, your daughters, they'll be drafted into the army. They'll be taken as maids. They'll take your land. The king will do all this. You want a king? You can have a king. But you're not going to like what you get when you get it. How did he get the king to the place of being king? It says that Saul's daddy, Kish, had donkeys. They left. Saul and the servant looked for them for 3 days, couldn't find them. They thought, there's a man of God up there, let's go talk to him. He's a seer, he's a prophet, he'll tell us where they're at. They go, they find him. God had already told him in his ear that they were coming. He anointed him king. He sent him to God's hill, told him when he got there he would meet prophets and a band would be playing. And it says these things came to pass. And it says that he had a changed heart. And it said the Spirit of God came upon him and he prophesied. He began to prophesy like the prophets prophesied. And he had a changed heart. Now we're going to stop there. And we'll pick him up next week. And he's going to end up in a mess. I'm talking about a mess. And when he ends up in a mess, Israel ends up in a mess. And then he got to start this whole process over again. Kind of sounds like my life and your life. Every time we think we about got it right, we get it wrong, and we just have to end up saying, well, what we need to do is punt. Right. If everything else fails, kick it down the road. We'll catch it next week. Let's stand together.